The whispers started the second I walked in. I saw my son, Mark, in the living room, and a flicker of something dark crossed his face as he saw me. He didn't come to greet me. He didn't even smile. The air in the room, usually warm with family chatter, turned cold and heavy. No one came to my side, and I felt the public shame wash over me as the guests, his wife's family, stared. My own family had left me to stand alone in the middle of this room. Friend, before I tell you about the one phone call that ruined their entire baby shower, do me a kindness. Tap subscribe so you're here to see what happens when they finally push a good woman too far. I tried to shake it off, to pretend everything was fine. I found a chair in the corner and sat, my hands trembling slightly in my lap, but I couldn't escape the feeling that I was an unwelcome guest at my own grandson's party. Mark came over, but the look in his eyes wasn't the look of a son who loved his mother. It was the look of a man who saw me as an obligation. My stomach dropped. I knew in that instant that I had been betrayed. Mark made a point of ignoring me. He went from person to person, laughing and making conversation, but his eyes never once met mine. He was a professional actor, playing the part of the devoted host. I watched him, a knot of hurt tightening in my chest, and I began to wonder if I'd made a mistake coming here. Every laugh he shared felt like a dagger to my heart, a cruel reminder of the son I thought I had. I saw his new wife, Jessica, shoot a sympathetic glance my way, but she quickly looked away when Mark's eyes fell on her. What was going on? He cornered me in the kitchen, his voice a low hiss that cut through the happy chatter in the next room. You're a burden, Mom. Everything you do is a burden. The words were a physical blow, and I stumbled back, feeling the foundation of our relationship crumble. My mind raced with the implications, and I knew in that moment that something had to change. His face, usually so kind and loving, was twisted into a mask of cruel frustration. He said I was a financial burden, a social burden, and that his life would be easier if I would just disappear. But I wasn't just his mother. I was a force he had long underestimated. I walked out of the party, a ghost, and went home. The cold in the car was nothing compared to the cold in my heart. The next morning, I called my lawyer, a kind man who had known me for years. He listened, his face a deep frown, as I poured out the story. He didn't say anything at first, just let me talk. He was my confidant, the one person I knew I could trust. Then he looked at me, a thoughtful expression on his face, and said, I think I know exactly what to do. His words gave me a flicker of hope, a small light in the darkness, and I knew I had to take a chance. My hands trembled as I dialed the number. It was Sarah, Mark's ex-wife, and she answered with a cheerful voice I hadn't heard in years. We talked for a few moments, catching up, but I had to tell her what I was about to do. Sarah, I said, my voice barely a whisper, I've made a decision. It's about Mark, and it's about my will. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could feel her shock, her confusion. I knew this was a huge risk, but I had to trust my gut. I hosted a dinner party a few weeks later. I invited Mark, Jessica, and to their surprise, Sarah. The atmosphere was tense, and I knew they all had questions. Mark looked at me with suspicion, but he had no idea what was coming. I had a plan, a terrible, beautiful plan. The silence grew as I took a deep breath, and I knew that this one moment would change all of our lives forever. I walked out of the party, a ghost, and went home. The cold in the car was nothing compared to the cold in my heart. The next morning, I called my lawyer, a kind man who had known me for years. He listened, his face a deep frown, as I poured out the story. He didn't say anything at first, just let me talk. He was my confidant, the one person I knew I could trust. Then he looked at me, a thoughtful expression on his face, and said, I think I know exactly what to do. His words gave me a flicker of hope, a small light in the darkness, and I knew I had to take a chance. My hands trembled as I dialed the number. It was Sarah, Mark's ex-wife, and she answered with a cheerful voice I hadn't heard in years. We talked for a few moments, catching up, but I had to tell her what I was about to do. "Sarah," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I've made a decision. It's about Mark, and it's about my will." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could feel her shock, her confusion. I knew this was a huge risk, but I had to trust my gut. I hosted a dinner party a few weeks later. I invited Mark, Jessica, and to their surprise, Sarah. The atmosphere was tense, and I knew they all had questions. Mark looked at me with suspicion, but he had no idea what was coming. I had a plan, a terrible, beautiful plan. The silence grew as I took a deep breath, and I knew that this one moment would change all of our lives forever. Mark accused me of being crazy, but I knew the truth. Sarah had a secret, one that she had kept from everyone, including me. She had done something years ago that deserved a reward, but no one knew about it. She never told a soul, not even her own family. She was a good person, a strong person, but she was a person with a secret. The secret was the key to all of this. It was the reason I was doing all of this. I pulled Sarah aside, and she confessed everything. She told me about the silent sacrifices she had made for me, things that I never knew about. She told me about the nights she had spent helping me with my late husband's care, the financial help she had secretly given, and the way she had protected me from Mark's manipulative behavior for years. My heart ached for her, and my resolve solidified. Mark was not the only one with secrets. I started to investigate, a nagging feeling telling me there was more to this story. I went to a locked cabinet in Mark's house, a place I had never looked before. I used a spare key I had kept for years, just in case of an emergency. Inside, I found a hidden file, something my son had been keeping from me. The documents inside revealed something dark and terrible, something that explained everything. The files contained proof of Mark's deceit. He was blackmailing Sarah, threatening to expose a secret that would destroy her life. He was a monster, using her past to control her. He had a file full of lies and false documents, all to keep her from telling me the truth. He was not just a greedy man, he was a cruel man, and I knew I had to expose him. My blood ran cold as I read each document. This was more than a simple family squabble. This was a crime. I confronted Mark, holding the file in my hand. His face went white with fear, and he lunged for the documents, but I was too quick. I held the file tightly, my hands shaking. He knew he was caught, and his composure cracked. He started to scream at me, to threaten me, but I didn't back down. I was a mother, a wounded lioness, and I was not afraid of my own son. But I had to face the facts. This wasn't just a matter of inheritance. This was a matter of life and death. Sarah and I grew closer, our bond forged in our shared pain and righteous anger. She told me the rest of her story, and I realized how truly cruel my son had been. We were a team now, ready to fight back. We spent hours talking, poring over the documents and preparing for our next move. She was more than just a daughter-in-law, she was my family. But she was a family I had to fight for. My lawyer was ecstatic. He saw a way to expose Mark's lies and protect Sarah from his threats. We worked tirelessly, gathering evidence and preparing our case. Mark was about to learn a lesson in humility. We had everything we needed to bring him down, but we had to be careful. The stakes were high, and one wrong move could ruin everything. Our plan was to go public. I decided to go public with the truth. I set up a blog, and I started writing about my journey, revealing the details of my son's betrayal. I knew I was risking my reputation, but I had to do it. The blog was my weapon, my way of fighting back against my son's lies. I didn't know what to expect, but I had to do it. The truth had to be told. I hit publish on the first blog post. It was a simple title, My Son, the Burden, but it was filled with emotion and raw honesty. The comments started pouring in, and I knew I had done the right thing. The response was overwhelming. People were sharing their own stories of family betrayal, of being called a burden, of fighting for their own dignity. But I had no idea that a comment, a single comment, would change everything. The story went viral. The blog post was shared thousands of times, and soon news reporters were calling me. My little blog had become a media storm, and Mark was being exposed to the world. He was a well-respected businessman, a pillar of the community, and his reputation was crumbling before his eyes. He tried to fight back, to discredit me, but it was too late. The world was watching, and the truth was coming out. My grandson, the one the baby shower was for, reached out to me. He was confused and hurt, but he wanted to hear my side of the story. I told him everything, and I waited for his reaction. I was scared. I was afraid that he would choose his father over me, that he would turn his back on me just like Mark had. But his response was one I never expected. I received an anonymous message from a stranger, someone who claimed to know my son. The message contained a picture that would change everything. The information was explosive, and I knew I had to act fast. The stranger was an old friend of my late husband's, someone who had been keeping an eye on Mark for years. He knew all about Mark's schemes, his manipulation, and his greed. He was my secret ally. He was my key. The baby shower was approaching, and I knew it was the perfect time to drop the ultimate truth bomb. I decided to make my final move, to expose Mark's true colours to everyone he knew. The whole family, all the people who had abandoned me at the last party, were about to learn a truth they never saw coming. The atmosphere was a mix of tension and forced happiness, but I knew it wouldn't last for long. I had the picture in my pocket, and the truth was on the tip of my tongue. I stood up at the baby shower, my voice strong and clear. I held up the picture I had received, and I told everyone what it was. Mark's face was a mask of pure terror as he realised his life was over. Jessica stood by his side, her face a pale blank, not a word escaping her lips. But the person who spoke was a complete shock. The picture was of Mark and a woman I didn't know, but the woman in the picture wasn't just a stranger. Jessica was pregnant with my son's baby. But the woman in the picture, the woman who was a stranger to me, was my son's new wife, Jessica. The picture showed her holding the hand of another woman, a woman who looked exactly like Sarah. It was a cruel trick, a betrayal within a betrayal, and the real twist was just beginning to unravel. Jessica broke down, sobbing uncontrollably as she confessed everything. She and Mark had planned the whole thing, a scheme to get my money and cut me out of their lives forever. They had faked the pregnancy, faked their love, and faked their entire relationship. Their grand plan had just come crashing down. Jessica was not just pregnant, she was a victim, a puppet in my son's cruel scheme. The entire family turned on Mark. The shame was palpable, and his carefully constructed lies were exposed for all to see. Sarah's name was cleared, and she was finally free. She was no longer a victim, she was a survivor. She was no longer a burden, she was a champion. But she had to choose between me and her family, and I knew her choice would be a difficult one. My grandson approached me, his eyes filled with tears. He hugged me tightly, thanking me for standing up for myself. I told him that I loved him, and that no matter what, I would always be there for him. He was a good boy, a kind boy, and I knew he would never be like his father. He had a choice to make, and I knew he would make the right one. Sarah and I became closer than ever before. We started a new life together, and she became the daughter I had always wanted. We were a family again, but it was a family I had to fight for. We spent our days working on our new life, and we spent our nights laughing and sharing stories. We were a family again, and it was a family that was stronger than ever. I sent a final letter to Mark. It was filled with emotion, and I told him that while I would always love him, I could not forget his betrayal. I closed the book on this chapter of my life, but I knew the story wasn't over. I had a new family, a new life, and a new story to tell. I was a survivor, and I was not afraid to fight for what I believed in. Months later, there was a knock on my door. It was a woman I had never seen before. She held a baby in her arms and looked at me with tears in her eyes. "My name is Linda," she said. And I'm your son's other daughter. I didn't know what to say, what to do, but I knew in that moment that my journey was far from over. Friend, thank you for staying with me to the very end. If you believe that strength isn't about how you fall, but how you get back up, then please tap subscribe and join our community. You won't want to miss the stories we share next. I've picked out another story just for you, and you should see it on the screen now. I hope to see you there.